All right. Yeah, so Doug asked me to do this talk, and it was sort of interesting because I was saying, boy, it's now been over a year since I dislocated my shoulder. I'm about ready to be done talking about it. But you got to be known for something. You might as well be known for getting hurt. But the interesting thing is, a few weeks ago, there was an avalanche outside of the Paradise Valley in Deep Creek. And one of the folks that got caught broke his femur. Pretty serious avalanche, big accident. Got heli-evac'd, he's fine. And I talked to some of the folks that were in his group. And they had come and they'd seen a short version of this talk. Maybe a month or two after I'd had the accident. And he said, we watched this talk, we changed the way we packed, and it totally made a difference. And I was like, okay, I'll still be known as the guy that got hurt that one time. Apparently it's worth it. But the other thing that was really interesting about this is it reminded me, yet again, I learned this lesson over and over and over, just like how important the basics are. We've been listening to all these talks, and I love the amount of research that's coming out of MSU, SLF. We got people from all over the place. There's a bunch of smart people doing a lot of really cool stuff in this room. And that is so cool. And it's still the basics that matter every day. So we're going to talk about going beyond the beacon. And again, we're going to go from the technical back to story time here. And our goals here are to think about the way that our systems, gear, training, and team come together to lead to successful outcomes. And one of the things that I want to talk about is just, as an avalanche center, we're talking about avalanches all the time. It sort of makes sense. It's right there in the title, Avalanche Center. And there's more to backcountry safety than that, as it turns out. So we're going to take it beyond the beacon. So we'll start with story time. So no kidding, there we were. We were having a great day of riding in the Centennial Range in Idaho. Actually, technically we were in Montana at the time. January 4th, 2022. I was out with Doug and 3 strong teammates. We had 3 members of the Fremont County Search and Rescue. And they were there showing us where avalanche accidents had happened, where people had been buried, where they dug people up, where there had been fatalities, where people ride, where people go. And it was bluebird, spectacular. There's way more snow than I thought there was. And it's like, all right, it's January, we're riding, it's deep. This is great. And then, Windshield Hill. No, I am not.
It's now called Zinn
Hill. I have personally renamed it. Nobody else knows the new name yet, but we're working on it, spreading that around. The sled was fine, as it turns out, and this is the windshield. They don't have windshields anymore because they break all the time. The other thing that's interesting about this, and maybe this is the true takeaway, is that if I'd been going faster, everything would have been fine. So just remember, if you learn nothing else, go faster, and it will be okay. All right. So this is not a talk about the sequence of events, but I think it's helpful to think about the timing and sort of what happened as we think about the process. So that was at 1:40 p.m. We were up on the Windshield Hill, also known as Zinn Hill, for future reference. I was not okay. Doug and Nick came down and they were working with me, and I was trying to reduce my own shoulder. It's the first time I'd ever had a shoulder dislocation. Wasn't going particularly well. After half an hour of trying that, decided that maybe sitting on this hillside's not the place to be anymore. And so Doug grabs me by the ankles and drags me on my butt down the hill until it got too flat. Then they throw me on a tarp and drag me a little farther. And then I hobble ineffectively to this super sweet campsite now that our friends Randy and Justin had set up. Already had a shelter going, already had a fire going. They even carved a bench. Like, that's the kind of group we were with. They had a bench for me to sit on. So that's 2:30. We're down there and we're settled in. And at that point, pretty much given up on reducing the shoulder. The plan was, one, I'd say if you're going to get hurt in the backcountry, being with search and rescue is pretty good planning. Plan was that they were going to call the search and rescue crew and also a helicopter. There's like, a helicopter is definitely what we want here. We have a great landing zone right here. We're in a big flat field, calm, blue skies. Like, yes. First of all, it's a little bit humbling to be the person getting a helicopter called for yourself. You're like, really? I'm not sure that that's how I saw my day going. And sort of that process of coming to terms with the fact that, boy, I've been in these situations a lot of times. I have not been the person on the receiving end. Who in here has been on the receiving end of an evac? All right. I know Q did the survey earlier. There's a lot of ACLs and MRIs that were going on, so there's some of that going on for sure. But this is a pretty big learning experience for a person. All right, so we're in place. We're gonna stay there and wait for a helicopter. The helicopters that were local were socked in valley fog. So the ground crew shows up 4:30, and now they're loading me into toboggan behind a 4-stroke sled, and they're about to pull me out. So, all right, great. Plan B. So plan B works pretty well for about 1.5 miles. Now it's getting dark because it's January 4th. And I'm wrapped in my little cocoon there, and I hear Randy, that guy, he's like, all right, boys, get up and down that hill a bunch of times, pack it in. Doug's like, I'm on it. So this happens, like the sleds are zipping back and forth, and I don't know what they make it, 10 feet? Yeah. Trying to pull the 4-stroke up this steep side hill. So now plan C. Plan C is my man Justin here. Puts me on the front of his sled. He says, all right, Dave, look where you want to go. So I'm like looking at the trailhead as far in advance as I can. And so he like stands over the top of me and like a total ninja rides me out of there. Get to the trailhead, get the ambulance at 6:30, ambulance ride at 7 o'clock, and by 8:30, I'm pretty tired, and Doug and I are on our way to McDonald's and the hotel in Rexburg, Idaho. So the thing that's really interesting is, aside from Doug, we were with a group of really competent people. I was hoping that one would go well. It did. And the bottom, and so even with a group of competent people and Doug, things took a long time. And these are the basics. The reminder that I think we all need from time to time is that our systems matter, our gear matters, your training matters, who you travel with and your team matters. And even when that all lines up, even when things are like as good as they get, you are with search and rescue, it's still kind of a deal to get out of the backcountry. So we're going to go into some of the things that made a difference. And I think one of the cool things about this is, sometimes we hear these stories like, oh yeah, like this is what went wrong. Things went pretty right. Things went really well. We learned some stuff, we changed some stuff, we adapted some stuff, but overall, things were pretty good. And so systems that made a difference for us as an avalanche center is check-ins and checkouts, the basics. People knew where we were. Didn't have to figure it out. We had a partner. We had good partners. We had good gear. We had communication devices. We had survival gear if we were going to be out for longer. So let's talk about some of the specifics here. I'm just curious. Are there any like self-proclaimed underpackers, the optimists, the alpinists in this room? Like, do we have any underpackers? Anybody who's willing to admit to it? Just Matt. Yeah, Matt. Yeah, like a roll of tape and a bottle of ibuprofen for a first aid kit. Okay. Overpackers. Do you have any overpackers? All right. So some sore shoulders in this room, but all right. Well, as it turns out, there is no just right. If you're hurt, you're probably going to want more than you have. So aside from carrying an emergency room on your shoulders, we're going to try to find the balance, and that's probably going to change depending on what you're doing. I'm a bit of an overpacker myself. And one of the takeaways for this, and one of the good reminders, is that we've been carrying all this junk in our packs for so many years. And for the most part, it's just sat there and given us those sore shoulders that we were talking about. But all of a sudden you want it. And when you want this stuff, you want it bad. So if you take another thing away besides Doug's like an okay partner, keep the stuff in your pack. When you want it, you're really going to want it. So we're just going to get into a little bit of what I carry. Of course, for basic first aid. This is not like ads for particular. It's just what I have. So any first aid kit is fine. I like the foam pad. Goes against the back of your backpack. You can use it for a splint. You can also use it to sit on. I appreciated sitting on a foam pad. Warm clothes. We have a bunch of ski patrollers in here. You've probably all responded to that person that's in the back bowl, like on the backside of Pioneer Mountain, like way over in like Hanging Valley, like somewhere far away, as far out on the bitter end of Slushman's as you can get. And by the time you get that person who might have just a simple knee injury to the first aid room, that person is cold. Or if you're like, ski patrolling is not what I do, but you stop and have lunch in the backcountry. You're working hard, you're sweaty, and you get cold. But the difference is you can move around after lunch and get warm again. At the first aid room, you got a dryer with warm blankets coming to that patient. So having warm gear was definitely key, and I used it all, including hand warmers. So this is another system, but one of our policies is that we have gear to survive the night. So I have my little really old Black Diamond Ascension climbing skins. Excellent climbing skins. No. They also make great bags, so that's what's in here. So the rules are be able to survive the night, But the secondary rule is, have some basic repair stuff so you don't spend an unnecessary night out in the backcountry, because that would be a bummer. A couple things, there's sort of the standards that are in here, but a couple things I'll point out. One of the tricks that I learned from that guy over there is a little mini road flare. Pretty good fire starter. Stays under green wood and burning pretty hot for a while. Another one that I like is just having a bar, like some food in that kit that doesn't get eaten on a regular basis. So it just stays there. The other thing is use your resources. So as our friends at Metallica said at that one time, give me fuel, give me fire, give me that which I desire. So in this case, we had a little 91 no octane, or no ethanol, sorry. So use your resources to stay warm. Communication. A system, policy. We have two means of communication. So we have options. You don't have to carry all 4 every time, but there needs to be 2 that work. So sat phone, satellite communicator, radio, and cell phone, all good options. The thing that I'd point out here is that we want to consider our battery life. So all of a sudden, there I am on the hillside. Doug's talking to Alex. Where'd Alex go? Alex, he jumped up front. He was over back there. All right. Doug's talking to Alex. Alex is making calls. We got the search and rescue guys calling. We got satellite communications going. We're on the sat phone. We're on the cell phone. We're on the everything phones. And turns out that if you're using all this stuff, batteries get used up. So it's really easy to sort of think about the cell phone as being a great tool, but we also often use that as to get cool videos of our friends skiing, or hill climbing Windshield Hill or Dave Zinn Hill. So making sure your battery lives are acceptable. So we used all this stuff that we'd been carrying around, and we added a little bit more. This is, when you're sitting around in a sling, you get the cool projects, like writing articles and what's that? Yeah, being the avalanche expert. I was the only one that was fielding phone calls for a long time, I felt like, because I was the only one that was sit in the office, just to wait for the 2 phone calls that come in a day. Dave, what your job is to sit here. If that phone rings, you pick it up. All right. So I became known as the avalanche expert for a brief period of time. Unfortunately, it's stuck with me. I'm not sure if I earned that yet. But so we did add more, and this is one of the projects that I went through and took care of it. And this was a really good lesson, because a lot of us at the Avalanche Center came from a ski background or a climbing background, and we have all grown to love snowmobiling, but we learned from these guys at Fremont County that it's boy, that 800cc engine carries stuff pretty well. It doesn't actually have to go on your back. So we added these little dry bags, and one goes out with the sleds every time. And what we added, this stuff was already in there. We had some sled rescue stuff, but we added more food. We added a stove. We added hand warmers, another flare, and some cord, and a tarp, and a charging station, which we'll talk about. Said, before we were going to survive the night, now we're going to be tolerably comfortable. One thing I want to point out specifically here, we didn't just get hot cocoa. We got hot cocoa with marshmallows. All right, so who here has been on an accident debrief? You responded to an incident. Just okay, well, what went well? What did we need to work on? And people are just you know what we should have done? We should have communicated better. Communication could have been better. Anybody? Yeah, so it turns out communication's important. And I mentioned that the power drain was a big thing. The sleds that we have power ports. So if that's what your thing is, we added charge cords we can charge anything just off of our sleds. It's like, yes, we should have that. Let's not worry about when it starts blinking red. Like, people have probably been on a phone call in here and said, oh shoot, my phone, 5% warning. That's a problem. Well, it's more of a problem if you're trying to orchestrate your own rescue. So your training matters. Who you go with matters. Your team matters. You know this. The critical thing is, of course, we want to go with our experienced friends. It's really fun. It does not mean that we should never go with inexperienced people. I'm simply suggesting that we tailor the adventure, the objectives, the anticipated outcomes for the day to your team. We had a super powerful team, and it was still a big deal. The other part to this is thinking about where you are as a teammate. I've been fortunate to have been part of 2 ski patrols in this area and the Avalanche Center, as well as like the greatest kayak program that's ever existed. And I think that falls under humility. And training's always been part of the culture. Like, being better at what we do has been part of the culture. But it's really important to really think about, where are our weaknesses? Where are our liabilities? Where are you at today? This photo was the first day I got to go back out on snow for a real field day last year. I didn't make it back last season. This is me at Telly Meadows, one of the premier backcountry destinations of southwest Montana. And I couldn't really lift my arm yet. Like, I sort of could. Maybe not holding a pole, but like, definitely I could lift my arm, just the weight of the arm. Couldn't really shovel. So I had to have my partners dig snow pits for me. It's great. I actually really enjoyed that part. But thinking about where you're at and whether you're contributing to the group on a given day or you're a liability to the group on a given day. And that can shift, and it can shift for a bunch of different reasons. This is where the humility comes in. I mentioned that, I was not really excited about getting a helicopter called for me. I remember at the beginning of this whole process, I was like, all right, so Doug, here's what you're gonna do. Like, I need my hands here. I'm gonna do this. You're gonna like rub my shoulder, and like I'm getting my shoulder back in. Like, I am getting myself out of here. It's like really good in principle. It didn't work for me. And I remember this process of going through the steps and trying to think. It's like, okay, like if I was rescuing me right now, this is what I'd do. All right, team, here's what I think we should do. Here's what I think we should do. And then coming to the realization, it's like, actually, all right, Dave, it's time to let other people drive right now. Like, you can barely walk because you're in so much pain. Like, you're not going to pull this off yourself. Like, it's time to turn it over to your team because you trust them, and let them take over. They're going to pull it off for you. Right? Nobody in this room, or nobody anywhere really, is like excited to be the person getting rescued. It's not that fun.
There's some in Big Sky that like.
All right. That's in the next talk. That's on the next slide. It's like, except for the people. It's like the iPhone auto call 911. It's like chasing rescues all over the place. All right. So, I was really lucky because we were with Search and Rescue. They were making decisions down the line as I got hurt. Like, they're just like, okay, he's hurt. we're going to call our team, we're going to call our buddies. They're going to start coming out this way. We're going to start working on a helicopter. Like Dave can talk about all this decision-making stuff he wants, but like this is what's going to happen. It's like he can think he's in charge for however long he feels like it. But so they initiated this rescue early. I was teaching an avalanche course to the Fremont County Search and Rescue folks this fall because I was like, I owe those guys one. They're getting their own avalanche course. And you know, a lot of the crew that was there on that day was there for the course. And I remember one of them said this. He said, "Oh yeah, totally. That was a good one. That was like the fastest rescue ever." Because we had 3 members of search and rescue with you. We got the radio call. We knew exactly where you were because our buddies told us. And it still took from 1:40 to 7, really, before I was in the ambulance, starting to go to the hospital. The fastest rescue ever. And they're not wrong. So just realize the amount of time that it's going to take to get one of these organized rescues going, get the volunteers coming your way. And, you know, if you're able to orchestrate your own rescue, that's great. Like if you're like, I think we might need help, but we may be able to pull this off. Turns out it's way easier to start this process during daylight hours than at night. So realizing that you may need the humility to say, hey, we need help. We're not going to pull this off by ourselves. The thing that I've been telling people in this class or in these talks, though, is where it is absolutely essential that you're really proficient and self-sufficient is when it comes to the basics, the partner rescue, the first aid, staying warm, and staying alive while you wait for the rescue. Like, you got to be able to pull that off. So this is not going to come as news to anybody in this room, but little problems become big problems really quickly, especially in the winter, especially in the backcountry. They can seriously complicate your day, and it's going to be quite an ordeal. So think about some of the basics here. Your training, competence, and humility, hope support strategy. The Mike, I always love that Mike Tyson quote, everybody's got a plan till they got punched in the face. Well, in this case, I got punched in the shoulder, but we're not going to just plan on figuring it out on the spot. We're not planning on rising to the occasion. We're going to fall back on our training, fall back on our systems, and fall back on our team, and have the gear that it takes to pull it off. So with that, we'll keep having a safe winter. Apparently, powder skiing is never going to end until it all falls apart next week. And I'll take any thoughts or questions. Must have nailed it.
I don't think you ever told us. Did you ever end up getting it reused in the field?
I did not.
Oh. So that man was a ninja to be able to.
Yeah, I was draped on the front of his snowmobile like this, holding onto the mountain bar and looking where I wanted to go intently. Because we were like side hilling and going through creeks and doing hill climbs. I was like, my goodness, look where you want to go. Toward the trailhead.
Sounds like it's a good thing Chabot was there.
Like I said, you gotta really weigh your assets and liabilities on any given day. I'll just leave it at that.
How much worse would it have been if it was just you and Chabot?
That's awesome.
I mean, would it have been better or worse?
Would it have been? It would have been worse. Mostly because I don't think Chabot's arms are long enough to do this.
That's awesome.
All right. That's what I got.
All right.